My name is Shiloh Maples, and I'm one of the co-instructors for Food Literacy for All this year. Food Literacy for All is hosted by the University of Michigan Sustainable Food System Initiative. Food Literacy for All is structured as an evening lecture series featuring different guest speakers each week to address diverse challenges and opportunities in both domestic and global food systems. This year's course is organized around the theme of food and care. By learning from activists, organizers, authors, and writers, food industry professionals, and scholars, we aim to ignite new conversations and deepen existing commitments to build a more equitable, health promoting, and ecologically sustainable food system. Before we hear from tonight's speakers, I would like to offer a few acknowledgements. This year, Food Literacy for All is co-led by Dr. Benedict Boussillon, professor and chair of Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan, and myself. This course is supported by our community partners, which includes Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, the Detroit Food Policy Council, and the Detroit Black Community Food Sovereignty Network. This course is also made possible by a phenomenal team of students, staff, and faculty. Sammy, our Food Literacy for All course coordinator. Taylor, our graduate student instructor. Sai, our Sustainable Food System Initiative coordinator. Dr. Leslie Huey, the Sustainable Food System Initiative, part of the Sustainable Food System Initiative Advisory Committee. Chris Taylor from College of Literature, Sciences, Arts, Technology, and Tiffany from Food Literacy for All's Greater. Food Literacy for All is made possible by the generous support of the Center for the Education of Women, Francis and Sydney Lewis Visiting Scholars Fund, or Visiting Leaders Fund, the School for Environment and Sustainability, and Program in the Environment. There are many ways to engage with the course in addition to the live stream sessions, including social media. Students have been using iClicker to participate in poll questions, and all sessions are recorded and available on the course website. At this time, I'd like to ask Taylor to join me to lead us in a quick poll question.
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you're a student in this class, you know what to do. Open up iClicker. If you're a community member joining us via Zoom, and by the way, we have about 140 people on Zoom right now tuned in with us, you will engage with this poll question via the Zoom polling feature. Today, our theme is fast food for thought. We thought we'd bring fast food into the conversation here. What is the most common fast food chain in Michigan? Is it A, McDonald's, B, Taco Bell, C, Burger King, or D, Subway? All right, the poll is open for students. Let's see what everyone thinks. Looks like most people are saying A, McDonald's. We have about 150 responses. Once we hit our 185, that's usually where we plateau. We will move on here. About 10 more seconds here. We're still seeing 60% of folks guessing A, McDonald's. Second most popular guess is D, Subway. All right, let's go ahead and move forward here. Drum roll. D, Subway. All right, pass it back to Shiloh to introduce our lineup here.
Thank you, Taylor. So this evening's event is called Fast Food for Thought because we'll hear 5-minute talks from 10 U of M faculty and staff. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Badgley up to introduce our first speaker.
Well, hello, everybody. Nice to see you all in the room and nice to see all of you on Zoom as well. I'm Catherine Badgley, a professor in ecology and evolutionary biology in the residential college. Our first speaker this evening is Alicia Ventresca Miller, assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology in LS&A and director of the Ancient Protein and Isotope Laboratory. The title of her talk, as you can see, I think is so clever, Stuck in Your Teeth, the Ancient History of Diet. And I find this topic fascinating because I study the diets of even more ancient mammals in the fossil record. So I can't wait to hear what she says. Her favorite food is Italian cookies that she grew up making, like anise flavored waffle cookies. Alicia, take it away.
Everyone, can you hear me? Yeah, that's working. Great. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I just wanted to thank the organizers, Benedict Bosseron, Shiloh Maples, Sammy Maldonado, and Leslie Hoy for inviting me to give a talk today. In the US, we spend over $174 billion a year on dental expenditures. This includes professional cleaning of our teeth. And I propose that by the end of this talk, you will all want to visit the dentist. And you will likely not forget what archaeologists find stuck in your teeth. So my talk today focuses on dental biofilm, commonly known as dental plaque. It's a sticky film that forms on your teeth. Dental biofilm formation occurs in several stages, from the initial adhesion, when bacteria and saliva attaches to the tooth surface, to maturation, when, if not removed, the biofilm becomes thicker and more complex. It's this last stage that dental plaque mineralizes into what we find archaeologically also known as dental calculus. Trapped within dental calculus, scholars have identified bacteria, viruses, human proteins, environmental debris, and most importantly, food. So this relatively new approach to the study of ancient diet in the past is via proteomic analysis of ancient dental calculus. So as humans consume dairy products, the dairy sticks to the biofilm on their teeth, and proteins are then trapped in the dental plaque. Here I show some examples of dairy from Kazakhstan and Mongolia, where fermented mare's milk, known as kumis or ayrag, and dried or salted cheese, known as kurt or aro, continue to be part of dietary practices today. So we collect this ancient calculus, we bring it to our laboratory and analyze it to search for proteins related to foods. Within calculus, researchers have identified direct evidence for the consumption of milk from different domesticated animals. This includes the detection of species-specific milk proteins from cattle, goats, and sheep. And here you can see the difference in a single peptide between these different species. So we are currently undertaking excavations in Mongolia and Kazakhstan, and today I'm going to tell you about recent work that we are doing in the Darha Depression of northern Mongolia. Since 2019, we've been excavating looted burials dating to the Mongol Yuan dynasty. So the Horig Cemetery in northern Mongolia was heavily looted in the past, and it's actually happening over the past decade. As you can see in these photos, each burial, as you can see here, was looted, and they originally had a large circular mound on top. So what we did is we salvaged materials from the surface and then excavated what remained within each burial. And our goal was to find out as much as we could about this cemetery and the people buried there from what the looters left behind. So what we found after analyzing dental calculus is that the vast majority of people were consuming horse milk. So you can see the horse milk here in green, but they're also consuming dairy and meat from horses, sheep, goats, and cows. And we found the first evidence for horse caseins, a protein found in milk and cheese. We also found horse blood, probably from the consumption of meat. So we have a really detailed set of information for people during the Mongol Yuan dynasty. But our most extraordinary find was the first evidence for yak dairy consumption. And this was globally. So yak are an important animal, especially in this high altitude region, valued for their high fat dairy and their abundant coats of waterproof wool. And this find should help us to clarify the timing of domestication of this iconic species. One of the people drinking yak milk was an elite woman who is buried with this tall boktok hat. And it's made of birch bark and it's covered in silk. You can see the hat here. And she was wearing a silk robe or a del, and her silk garment have a 5-clawed dragon depicted on it. And this is a motif that's reserved for elites, specifically the imperial family. And it may be that this woman was a member of the royal lineage, possibly descended from Chinggis Khan. And you can see here in the bottom right, this wall hanging, this matches identically these two princesses depicted and the del that we found. And she was one of the people who was drinking yak milk. So we think that maybe the elite members of this community had control of or special access to yak dairy. We continue to work in the Darha Depression and regularly invite herders and their families to share meals with us in our camp. These meals often include yak butter and a plethora of other dairy products. So this project would not be successful without my wonderful colleagues, especially Drs. Bayersachen, Clark, Hamel, Hurlsuk, and Miller. And it's supported by lots of organizations in Mongolia and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you for this. My name is Bénédicte Boisson. I'm the co-instructor with Shallow Maples of Food Literacy for All. And it's my pleasure today to introduce our next speaker, who is my affiliated colleague in Romance Languages, Dr. Amber Ball, who is a LSA Collegiate Fellow in Romance Languages and Literature. She will give a talk entitled The Princess and the Peanut, the Cash Crop Beneath the Mattress of Colonial Modernity. And her favorite food is, funnily enough, and also so apropos, nut butter, whether peanut, almond, or anything else. Yeah, Amber.
Sorry. Hello. I'll try not to forget to speak into the microphone, but you can wave if I do. Oh. Okay. So, as you can read on the screen, I'm a scholar of literature, and because I guess the not so technical term for that is a scholar of stories, I'm generally interested in the story that the peanut can tell us about empire, and especially the French colonization of Senegal. This is the story I thought I'd tell this evening, and so I titled my talk, The Princess and the Peanut, the Cash Crop Beneath the Mattress of Colonial Modernity. I like to think of the peanut as the pesky thing under the mattress of colonial modernity, because just like the pea in Hans Christian Andersen's famous tale, there is something a little pesky about the peanut. And the first and most important way I mean this is that, weirdly enough, given that the peanut was France's most lucrative export in the 19th and 20th centuries, and this continued into independence, this crop is not something people talk about that much in my field. Perhaps this is because peanut farming isn't very glamorous, but I think this quality actually tells us something crucial, namely that banal initiatives and forms of agricultural change were so central to empire and how empire itself functioned. To be more specific, the peanut is pesky in the context of French colonialism because it forces us to acknowledge that more subtle, less violent changes made to social organization and landscapes on the African continent have had equally, if not more significant, long-term effects. And I hope that's going to be clear by the end. Basically, if empire is a coin, then there is a counterpart to the violent imposition of colonial authority and warfare. In the 19th and 20th centuries in West Africa, the other side of this coin was a form of collaboration with local sovereigns and individuals that led to the wholesale adoption of cash cropping, that is, the growth and sale of peanuts. This is a form of soft power that I want to call peanut diplomacy. We are all subliminally aware of the central role that agriculture has played in basically every historical ill, from plantation slavery to large-scale deforestation, although we don't necessarily place agriculture, i.e. farming, at the center of these stories. When colonial agriculture is mentioned, it's generally these three crops that take center stage, that is sugarcane, coffee, and cocoa, which dominate discourse. All three of these crops are generally grown on plantations and involved waged or bonded labor and regimes of private property. In short, these are the things that we more often associate with literal violent conscription of colonized populations into modernity and the metaphorically violent colonial project of standardizing conceptions of land, labor, and time. Here again, the peanut is pesky precisely because it reveals that force and absolute standardization are only half of the story. In Senegal, following the abolition of the slave trade in 1848, the French needed something to fill their coffers. This pivoted into a quest for other materials to facilitate their industrial transition in the 19th century. This is the moment that peanuts took center stage as the lungs of the colonial economy. And why the peanut? Because Europe needed oil to cook with, to grease machines such as railway engines, and especially to manufacture soap. The rise of the peanut in Senegal happened, though, through a semi-autonomous embrace of this crop. That's to say that there was no standardization of land tenure or labor by colonial authorities. Private property wasn't actually introduced in Senegal until after independence. This means that Senegalese farmers were free to grow or not grow the crop when, how, and in the quantity that they wished. All that mattered was that the product, the peanut, was sold to French trading companies for the price that they, of course, set. While in one small region of Senegal, the Kayor, peanut growing was tested out under a plantation structure, what made it spread like wildfire were these more subtle tactics of coercion. These specific tactics included the imposition of a colonial head tax, which had to be paid with money and therefore required rural peoples to be producing something they could sell for money. The peanut was also easily adaptable to Senegal's arid climate and had a relatively short growing season, making it ideal for yield without a major investment. It also required no new tools or methods of farming and spread via what I earlier called peanut diplomacy. And by this, I mean that it was Senegalese traders working for French firms who introduced the crop to new areas in Senegal. These traders used informal means, like marrying into the village, to integrate with new communities and encourage a transition from subsistence farming to cash cropping. Peanut diplomacy has led to watershed forms of change. Presently, 65% of arable land is cultivated every year in Senegal, and this is perhaps the major way that the peanut is pesky, because it has created a lasting and kind of insidious form of dependency. For a compendium of reasons that I can't really go into, that include falling demand, competing exporters, climatic instability, peanuts are not safe crops to grow, despite remaining the principal crop grown in Senegal. To put this paradox as simply as possible, Senegal, a majority agricultural nation, does not have food sovereignty. Then and now, farmers cultivate peanuts, but they are massive importers of rice, which is a staple crop. Farmers must buy rice, and so they remain bound to a volatile global market in peanut prices. I'll stop there.
Hello. Hi, my name is Sai Chiravu, and I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker. Dr. Alexis Handel is an associate professor of epidemiology in the Department of Epidemiology and an associate professor of global public health at the School of Public Health. Dr. Handel will give a talk on harvesting inequity, the role of work for women in agriculture, and their favorite food is anything with lemon.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So globally, we're seeing an increase in women in the formal labor force, with women making up 38% of the agricultural labor force, including in large-scale export-led agricultural production, which is depicted on this slide. The US is no exception, where women workers make up over a third of the multi-billion-dollar agricultural and food system workforce, yet they tend to be the most vulnerable and most exploited and discriminated against, and where limited information exists regarding their experiences. It's also important to note and to recognize that the inequities faced by all farm workers, men and women, are rooted in historical and structural racism in this country. The US economy was built on slavery practices and explicit policies that supported the exploitation and occupational segregation of minoritized communities then and still to this day. So farm workers serve a vital role in Michigan's robust agricultural industry, including women farm workers. Yet despite their essential role, their conditions have not improved much over the years. Because of this, we developed the Michigan Farm Worker Project as an academic community participatory collaboration to better understand the working and living conditions of farm workers in Michigan. Our core community partners listed here have been an essential part of our team from the beginning. For the first study of the MFP, we conducted a qualitative study and interviewed farm workers and stakeholders, 35 of whom were farm workers, and over half being women farm workers. To date, we have had 2 important publications from this first study, focusing on the precarious and exploitative nature of the working environment for these workers and on the context specific to women farm workers. In the next few slides, I'm going to summarize some broad themes that emerge from our analyses and highlight those noted by women workers or which relate to issues that women workers face, and I'll provide a few illustrative quotes. In general, all workers spoke to hazardous and demanding work conditions, low wages, and job insecurity. Reproductive health was a key concern for women workers in particular. Specifically, participants noted safety and health concerns related to pregnancy and to menstruation. They spoke of the lack of access to medical care or having to take personal non-paid time off to seek care. So this woman migrant farm worker stated, there were no bathrooms. There were some, but at the warehouse far away. Like 1.5 miles, I could not walk all the way there. So I held urination from morning until noon and from noon until the afternoon. I got a urinary tract infection, but it is only now that I think that maybe that's why. With menstruation, I couldn't hold it. So when we were working in one field and sometimes we would go to another one farther away, I would wait until the last minute and quickly change in the field. I would wait for everyone to leave and change. All workers discussed facing racism, discrimination, and importantly, dehumanization. Workers discussed feeling as if they're regarded as simply part of the equipment of the farm and not as human beings, that they are easily replaced. This environment contributes to one with unequal power dynamics and a lack of worker autonomy. Workers also discussed social isolation. Women in particular noted facing sexual harassment, especially for single women, who seem to be particularly vulnerable to receive inappropriate comments and abuse. They spoke of fear of reporting harassment and abuse due to the fear of losing their jobs, deportation, and family separation. I'll just focus on the second quote. They know we need the job, but we are people. We're not animals to be overworked. Now, there is a difference because I will say we work just like men. You could say we work even more because we still arrive home and have to keep going. They arrive and well, they just rest and they get paid more and women get paid less. Her experience here highlights the issue of dehumanization as well as wage inequity and women's unpaid labor in the home. In terms of living conditions and work-life balance, which for these workers are inextricably linked to the working context, most workers spoke about lack of privacy, lack of access to facilities that were clean, that were functional. They talked about the inappropriate living conditions for young children, especially at the work sites. And many women spoke about the double burden of being caretakers for their families and having domestic responsibilities, but also working long hours. Some noted feelings of guilt as if they're neglecting their children. I'll focus on the second quote here. There are times when we are at home and they, the employer, say, today you're not going to go to work. Today you're not going to work, like on a Saturday, let's say. And then the next morning, the boss shows up at your door. Hey, I want you to go do this job. And if I have plans to take my kids somewhere, or I'm going to spend a little time with them, I can't. I have to fulfill my job. I don't have space for my personal life, not even for my family. I have to work. For women farm workers in Michigan and nationwide, work is an important and complicated issue, one that is driven by the broader historical and current socioeconomic, political, and immigration context, which contributes to the inequities faced by these workers and the broader farm worker community. Women agricultural workers are essential workers. Their equitable and decent employment is crucial for improving agency, lifting households out of poverty, and enhancing their health and education, which benefits their families and the wider community. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Huey. I'm an associate professor of urban and regional planning. And I have the pleasure of introducing Allison Perez, who I got to know in a year-long class called the Transformative Food Systems Seminar that she was a part of. Allison is a PhD student in American culture in the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. The title of her talk is A las Ventanitas Valientes Correr, Food, Identity, and Politics in Cuban American. And her favorite food is ripe in season South Florida mango, which I totally agree.
Good evening, can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for being here. From influencing foreign policy to swaying presidential elections, the Cuban American community has, in the past 60 years, flexed significant influence in US politics. But what if I told you that one of the biggest hotbeds for political discussion in Cuban Miami was this coffee window, or ventanita, as we call it? Located on Southwest 8th Street in the heart of Little Havana, the restaurant Versailles was opened in 1971 by the Cuban immigrant Valls family and has grown since then from a small dining room serving classic Cuban dishes into an expansive restaurant, coffee shop, and bakery that spans an entire city block. It serves thousands of customers a day and now bills itself as the most famous Cuban restaurant in the world. Well, in recent years, as Little Havana has mainly become a tourist destination, the restaurant and the bakery serve mainly that clientele. But the Ventanita is still frequented by locals who have, over the years, consistently used this shared space for informal political dialogue and debate, and the occasional protest. In fact, the notoriety of Versailles' Ventanita as a key political space has led even sitting presidents to visit, including Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. Even though Versailles was opened by Cuban immigrants who arrived after Fidel Castro's 1960 revolution, its salience as a space for political expression extends to all waves of migration, including for migrants who have arrived in the past 5 years. In fact, this past summer, I ended up at Versailles Ventanita for a post-dinner espresso with my tia and happened upon this demonstration led by recently arrived Cuban immigrants to commemorate the widespread protests of July 11th, 2021 that took place all over Cuba. These 2021 protests led to a repressive crackdown by Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel, forcing many protesters to flee the country while others ended up in prison for voicing their dissent with the regime. Despite their limited time in the United States, their ties to Cubans from other waves of migration allowed them to identify Versailles as a place to voice their political speech and to claim this space as their own, just as other Cuban immigrants before them have done. In my research, I seek to examine the relationship between food, identity, nationalist storytelling, and politics within the space of various restaurants in US-based Cuban immigrant communities. By focusing on a series of restaurants, highlighting the aims and political identities of different waves of Cuban migration, I hope to underscore how Cuban identity is articulated and negotiated in space of the restaurant. Since the Cuban independence wars of the late 19th century, Cuban immigrants in the United States have built food businesses in the places they've settled, which have served as sites of community and political organizing, as well as casual places for friends and family to meet and celebrate their identity. As noted by Luis A. Perez Jr., Cuban diasporic newspaper Patria's roster of Cuban advertisers in New York between 1892 and 1895 listed 5 bodegas and 4 restaurants. By the 1920s, Jorge Duani notes that Cuban, Puerto Rican, and other Spanish restaurants proliferated in Manhattan's Upper West Side and East Harlem neighborhoods. Throughout the rest of the 20th century and at the dawn of the 21st, migrants have continued to arrive in the United States from Cuba. Even in the past 5 years, Cubans have been arriving in record numbers, with over half a million Cuban immigrants arriving in the United States between 2022 and 2023. However, these more recent waves of migration have, from 1960 on, overwhelmingly been concentrated in South Florida. And with these continued waves of migration, food businesses have remained sites of community building and negotiation. Given its prominence and its renown outside of South Florida, Versailles will play a huge role in my research, but I also looked at other Cuban restaurants less frequented by tourists, including El Rey de la Frita and El Mago de la Frita, and restaurants in other metropolitan areas that have been home to Cuban immigrants, including Tampa's The Columbia Restaurant and New York City's Victor's Cafe. I also hope to include newer businesses run by more recent Cuban immigrants, such as Miami's Acere Batidos and Pizzeria La Isabela, both of which sell Cuban pizza. In terms of methods, I utilize archives, ethnography, and oral history as tools to explore my research questions and to paint a holistic picture of each location, community, and restaurant I explore. I plan to use archives such as the Cuban Heritage Collection, where I'll spend time this summer, and historical newspapers to construct an image of each wave of migration, location, and community, and will utilize oral history interviews to fill in any gaps in the archives about particular restaurants or communities. Within specific restaurants, I hope to spend time conducting ethnographic research in order to get an intimate understanding of the labor, interpersonal, cultural, and political community dynamics of each space. While I'm still in the pre-candidacy phase of my PhD journey, I'm grateful for the opportunity to present my research interests with you all here today and at Fast Food for Thought alongside these incredible speakers, and I thank you for your time.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Sammy Maldonado, and I have the pleasure of introducing our next amazing speaker, who I met in the same program as me at the School for Environment and Sustainability. Abigail Maroli is a second-year graduate student in the Environmental Justice specialization here at SEAS. She'll be presenting on her capstone project, which is building a framework for manoomin or wild rice stewardship in the Great Lakes region. And her favorite food is her mom's bolognese.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And I'm presenting my capstone project, like Sammy said, building a framework for wild rice restoration. So this was done as part of a capstone project. I first want to shout out my team, who I'm really happy I got the opportunity to work with over the last 16 months. Margaret, McKenna, Ryan, Shiloh, and Brooke. And also before getting into this presentation, I want to take a moment to discuss my positionality in this space. I'm not an Indigenous person, so everything that I'll share with you tonight is inherently secondhand. I've learned this through the generosity of Indigenous authors whose writings I've had the joy and privilege of reading, and also through Indigenous people who have trusted me enough to share their stories and histories with me as a student researcher. So to get started, manoomin or wild rice is also known as the goodberry. It's an aquatic grass that produces edible seeds. In the Anishinaabe origin story, wild rice is what brought Anishinaabe people to the Midwest. It's a staple food among Anishinaabe people and other tribes, and it has cultural and nutritional significance. It's also an indicator species because of its interactions with other native species and an indicator of biodiversity health. It's essential to Indigenous communities in the ecological health of the Great Lakes region. We were invited by the Sault Ste. Marie tribe to co-produce a toolkit centered around facilitating wild rice stewardship and restoration on a regional scale. This toolkit includes an ecological analysis, restoration plan analysis, policy analysis, land use and spatial analysis, and landscape design theories for stewardship. And we also conducted interviews. For today's presentation, I'm going, oh, oops, I skipped a little bit. So like I mentioned, wild rice is extremely significant, so much so that it's been enshrined in treaty rights. Unfortunately, those treaty rights have been unjustly violated through targeted attempts to interrupt social ecological relationships. And then also just consequences of settler colonialism, like agriculture and development, climate change, and pollution. I do want to highlight ongoing resistance, particularly the role of women with wild rice in this space. One of the things that I worked on in this project was building a restoration matrix. So to better understand the current efforts going on throughout the region, we looked at public-facing restoration and stewardship plans from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. We then conducted a content analysis of public-facing documents, and that included a conceptual analysis where we just looked for the existence of these plans and what was in them, and then a relational analysis where we tried to draw relationships between what we found in those plans. And this is a living repository of tribal-led restoration frameworks. So we took the screenshot to show you what this looks like, and this is one example. So we've highlighted the document of origin, the tribes that are involved, other organizations, the state where it took place, if the plan was local or regional, the document type. We also took high-level notes, and we identified threats, tools, and strategies, and if the restoration effort was successful, if that was commented on. So using qualitative data methods, we pulled out main themes that we identified. In the blue boxes, you can see the main threats that we found. And in the pink boxes, those are the tools and strategies that were used to address those threats. We then categorized those into these overarching categories like invasive species or climate change. And then we wrote a report where we went into more detail about what we were finding in these plans and relationships that exist on a regional scale. So we found that while each wild rice sand is certainly unique, there are challenges that are experienced across the region, like sulfate pollution or invasive species. And likewise, the methods to address these challenges are also utilized by people across the region. So we think there's a great opportunity for collaboration. We also found that these tools are not one-to-one, meaning that each tool might address several challenges. And that regional collaboration and communication might be able to support wild rice restoration. So with that, I'll say miigwech, which means thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. My name is Yvette Perfecto. I'm a faculty member here in SEAS, the School for Environment and Sustainability, and it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Alan Gruska. And Alan is an expert in sustainable development. He is a lecturer here in the school. He has 30 years experience working in universities and the nonprofit sector, as well as agencies in the United Nations. So very broad experience working mostly with farmers in the global South. And I met Alan many years ago. I'm gonna out you, Alan, in terms of your age, because I was taking note, and it's about 40 years that I met Alan here in Michigan when I was a graduate student, and he was a graduate student also in biology. And after that, we overlapped in Nicaragua, where I went to do my PhD dissertation research, and he lived there for 12 years. So Alan is gonna talk to us today about smallholder farmers need more agroecology, not inaccessible technologies. And his favorite food is Pilsen beer with guacamole and chips.
Thank you, Yvette, for that kind introduction, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me to speak tonight. So 84% of the 570 million farmers in the world are smallholder farmers who cultivate less than 2 hectares of land. Of those 480 million smallholder farmers, they support over 2.5 billion people in the world. Despite the significance, the smallholder farmers and their communities are often very poorly served by the international agriculture research system, including donors and multilateral organizations. These smallholder farmers, as indicated in the orange and the yellow, mostly live in Asia, notably China and India, but also throughout sub-Saharan Africa and some in Latin America. Very quickly, I'm going to talk about one case study, that is of the fall armyworm as it arrived from the Americas, where it's native, into Africa. So the fall armyworm, this is the pest, is an insect, Lepidoptera, that's native to the tropical regions of the Western Hemisphere, the Americas. The adult moth in the corner is a strong flyer and disperses long distances very quickly. Its preferred host crop among the crops is maize or corn. So the female flies to the corn plants, lays her eggs, and the larvae hatch and then burrow down into the whorl, feeding on young leaves. In 2016, this pest was first reported into Africa, and it caused this very dramatic damage and alarming to farmers and local authorities. In 2017, I was asked to coordinate the FAO's, the Food and Agriculture Organization's global fall armyworm program. So we began to work with farmers organizations, and national programs to develop tactics and strategies that the farmers could use to manage this new pest. We also worked very closely with donors looking for the money to make these programs run. Philanthropies, the Consultative Group for International Agriculture Research, development agencies, companies, and national programs. Overwhelmingly, or completely, they told us they advocated for, and their narrative was that these farmers needed new technologies. They needed GM crops, genetically modified corn. They needed new pesticides. They needed digital tools and drones. They also said that these farmers needed access to value chains and markets. But 98% of African maize farmers are smallholders, and 92% of the area planted in maize across Africa is grown by smallholders. They produce basically for family consumption. And if they sell anything excess, they sell to intermediaries for low prices. They don't have access to international markets. They don't receive subsidies or have insurance, so they use few inputs. So the fall armyworm moved from the Americas to Africa, but more importantly, it moved from very different corn maize systems in the Americas to Africa. As demonstrated here on the left, you see these industrial monoculture, large scale, high input production. Then it moved to Africa, where basically it was in smallholders production systems, diverse systems with few inputs. US and European maize farmers get very high yields for their corn. They sell into mature, massive, diversified markets. They also receive massive subsidies. European and American farmers receive $500 billion of subsidies every year. So they're able to afford high technology, including the use of genetically modified BT corn, which is they take the gene out of the bacteria, put it in the corn plant, so the fall armyworm is killed if it eats the crop. But working with African farmers and their organizations and national programs, we had to look for other techniques because they can't afford GM crops or other new technologies. So we began to work with farmers and organizations and understand the agroecology of the maize systems, leading to a whole plethora of options, which I don't have time to go into, in terms of techniques to manage the fall armyworm, including the natural enemies, parasitoids and predators, plant diversity, local botanicals, and entomopathogens, those pathogens that kill the insect, the fall armyworm, but also soil. Turns out the use of soil, simply picking up soil from the corn field, putting it into the corn plant, is an excellent way to manage the fall armyworm. It can be done very easily by farmers as they walk through their crops, putting it only in infested plants. Over 60% of the smallholder maize farmers that see this practice once adopt it. Now, there are ways that I can explain the mechanisms there, but I don't have time. It's also a great little video if you have time to go look at it later. But the takeaway is this: if you hear people talking about transferring technologies to smallholders, better to think about why not look for truly accessible, sustainable, effective agroecological methods and go down that path. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany Harris, and I'm a first-year master's student studying environmental justice. And today I have the honor to introduce Dr. Rebecca Hassan, and she is the professor in the School of Kinesiology and Movement Science, and also the program director of Impact. Her presentation is entitled Fast Physical Activity for Thought, and her favorite food is ice cream.
Well, I am your commercial break for today, 5 minutes. We're going to talk I'm not going to try to convince you to go to the refrigerator and get a nutritious snack. What I'm going to try to convince you is to get an exercise snack, because there's a lot that we can learn from nutrition in the physical activity realm, because our children are not getting enough physical activity. We do a report card every 2 years. And unfortunately, for the last 10 years, the United States has been getting a D- in physical activity for our children. They are only 1 in 5 kids are exercising and getting the right amount of 1 hour of physical activity every single day. And so we are working to change that in the School of Kinesiology by prescribing exercise snacks. So some of you might be wondering, what are exercise snacks? What is that? Did she just come up with that term? No, this has been around for the last 10 to 15 years. Because people, if you think people hate Brussels sprouts, they hate exercise even more, to where we can't even think about prescribing 1 hour of exercise. We boiled it down to just 30 seconds will give you a cardiometabolic benefit. There's a whole review paper that was put out a few years ago that focuses, if you just run up the stairs real quick, dash to your car, if you do any of these things for 30 seconds to a minute, you can get real health benefits. Cardiometabolic, reduce your risk for type 2 diabetes, all sorts of benefits, but people still aren't exercising. There's even a lot of different articles in the New York Times prescribing exercise snacks. But again, I think it's the wrong audience. We're talking to adults. Adults don't like to exercise, but who does like to exercise? Kids. And kids naturally do exercise snacks. Exercise snacks are these small bursts of physical activity. If any of you have kids or you're around kids, you know that if a child asks you to go to the bathroom, they, for whatever reason, will sprint to the bathroom for no reason. They're always moving in these short little bursts, and these short little bursts are actually great. It's part of their development. They need a lot more exercise, twice as much exercise than we do, but they do not exercise in that continuous fashion like we do. You don't put a child on a treadmill for an hour and say, get your physical activity recommendations, right? We're laughing because that's what we don't do. But somehow that's how we prescribe exercise to kids. And so we have been focusing on, can we use these small bursts? Can we harness the power of their natural physical activity patterns to promote physical activity? And why we like this is because, again, it aligns with their natural physiology as they're growing and developing, but you can also put an exercise snack anywhere. You can put it in a classroom, you can put it at home, you can put it in a community, you can put it anywhere. So it's very accessible to all children, irrespective of the resources that they have in their communities. So here's an example of an exercise snack that you might be able to see. The video might not work, but this little bugger right here, he's exercising with his mother, and his mother is doing regular physical activity, just marching in place. And he does a little 7-second burst, stops, turns, and looks at his mom, and then goes back to exercising again for another 7 seconds. So this is an example, and research is actually demonstrated using direct observation, watching children, showing that their natural physical activity patterns between the ages of 6 to 10 or about 3 to 7 seconds. So those small exercise breaks, that happens on a regular basis. And here's an example. This is also a video. You can see this on our website. This is an exercise break in a classroom. So teachers love exercise breaks for 3 reasons. One, it helps to prime the brain for learning. We know physiologically, if you engage in an exercise snack, it'll increase blood flow to the brain, oxygen to the brain, and there's a chemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, that helps you with focus and attention. It helps you to pay attention. And this is really important after the COVID-19 pandemic, because a lot of kids are having difficulty paying attention and focusing in classrooms. And we're actually seeing an uptake in behavioral issues. That leads us to the second reason why teachers like exercise snacks, because it helps to regulate their emotions. It helps them to understand, ooh, I'm in the red zone right now, but if I just get some physical activity, I help to burn those calories, and it helps me get in the green zone, which is the focus zone, and it helps me to learn. And the third reason is it just helps to get the wiggles out. And kids just want to have fun and get the wiggles out in their classroom. So can we provide a buffet of options of physical activity snacks to kids? Yes, we can. There's many different ways in which we can do this. These are evidence-based strategies to help kids move all throughout the day. And we are working across schools, homes, and communities across the state of Michigan to help do that. One of the cool things we were able to do during the pandemic is actually put exercise snacks on TV. And so we are the only state to where you can say, turn on the TV to get your exercise. Most other states are saying, turn off the TV, but we can turn it on. So we provided universal access to physical activity in Michigan. Thank you for your time and attention. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready for an exercise snack. I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Miranda Brown, the director of the honors program in the College of LSA and a professor of Chinese studies here at the University of Michigan. She's a cultural historian of Chinese food and medicine, and her forthcoming book, Dumpling Therapy, should be out pretty soon. Her book explores the meaning of Chinese food in America as a love language and site of identity. We're so excited to have Dr. Brown here sharing her talk, Should Food Really Be a Love Language?
So I want, oops, can you hear me all right? All right, thank you. So I just want to thank the organizers for doing this and all of you for sticking with me here. So this is my talk, Should Food Really Be a Love Language? I'm about to pop some bubbles and say no. So I'm a weird person for this. I don't really sort of study the environment, and I don't have anything to say about health. I eat way too much skinny pop and other things that I don't want to share. So I'm going to just kind of do my cultural history thing. So this is a talk. And so what am I doing here? And why would I say food shouldn't be a love language? So like many of you, I got kind of addicted to social media during the pandemic, right? I mean, what's a day without a little bit of doom scrolling or some good hours spent on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok. And one of the things I do, of course, is browse or stalk, food pages. So I'm just going to give you a wonderful sort of clip. I think this is Instagram from my friend Lucas Sim, who is a wonderful chef. He has a Junsa kitchen in New York City. He's the gentleman right here. He went to Yale and then told his Hong Kong Chinese parents that he wanted to become a cook. And he is one of the most thoughtful, I think, sort of food people there is. He did a lot of great work during the pandemic on anti-Asian hate movements. But here's a clip from 2021. He says, in Asian culture, food is our love language. This is especially seen and felt in first-generation immigrant homes like mine, where food was often the placeholder for words and emotions, including, I love you, I'm sorry, I'm proud of you, you fucked up, but I still love you, etc. Okay, so I just want to hit this kind of vanilla sentiment. Obviously, he's not alone. If you sort of take any kind of TikTok, Instagram page, any article about Chinese foodways in America, you will find something more or less the same. Here's another one. Layered cake is actually a sort of ethnic Chinese food that took shape in Southeast Asia and places like Indonesia, where it's now part of the local cuisine. And here we have another blogger saying, deep love language is Asian cultures. And it's often used to bridge the cultural and communication gap between generations of Asian immigrants. Okay. So this is what I'm going to pick a fight with for now. Okay. So why am I interested in picking a fight with TikTokers or YouTubers? Well, I'm kind of a grumpy woman of a certain age. But I'm also writing this book feverishly because once you get a trade publication sort of contract, you actually have to fulfill it. The lawyers aren't going to be on you. So I'm doing this book called Dumpling Therapy, which is a history of Chinese food. It's an extended reflection on the meaning of what Chinese food is, what is heritage, what we should do with this nettlesome term authenticity, which I have grown to hate with a passion. Those are my dumplings, but they're not edible. And it's for the pictures, right? I mean, it's food art. The project has also transformed me into an Asian Americanist. I am a proud China historian, a classicist, but I had to go there because I'm interested in Chinese food in America. And then we're still a memoir writer. And then, of course, now you're going to see the other side of me, my part-time food pundit. So here we go. So what's wrong with talking about, oops, why is this not moving? Oh, food as a sort of love language. Well, I think first of all, we have to ask ourselves why food is the center of Asian American identity, or especially Chinese identity in America. Well, here's my sort of ethnic credentials, my mother, my grandmother, and my daughter who loves food. But I also want to ask a broader question. What is the pitfalls of talking about food as a love language, especially in sort of an Asian and especially Chinese American context? So here's my beef, okay? I think it's obvious why Chinese focus on food in America, because many people get their foothold in America through the food industry. This is something that happened because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which prevented them from going into other kinds of industries. But let's not talk about this so much. It's also a place where people kind of hold on to their identities, especially when they lose all of their language skills. And what I would just kind of like to do is, oops, sorry, this thing is not behaving today. Is there a clicker? No. Why we should talk about food as a love language? Well, there are, I think, questions about how we talk about food and care. So the assumption that Lucas brings up, which is that Chinese parents or Asian parents are unable to say "I love you," right? They use food to do this. I think is sort of embedded in many, many problematic assumptions. So here I'm going to pull up Pearl Buck from 1926. She's an important writer. And one of the things we hear in these sort of older pieces of writing is that, which are legacies of colonialism, is that Chinese are often impassive, they're impenetrable. And this is one of a number of stereotypes that you have of Chinese in general, right? That they're unfeeling, they're callous, they're inhuman. They're also, so unfeeling that they are into torture or they don't care about it. They have a lack of ethics. They'll eat your dogs, watch out. And so I feel that the problem with talking about food as a sort of a placeholder for feelings is that it actually speaks to a larger tradition of stereotyping about the Chinese and Asian cultures in general, which we've seen in the West. Sorry, I'm getting kind of this is the pundit side. So anyway, I'm going to end here by just reminding everybody that these stereotypes have become deeply ingrained in sort of the story about Chinese food in America and the stories that Chinese people in America and their descendants tell about themselves. And I would like us to start to resist a little bit. So, talk back to TikTok. Think about food as a source of nourishment, of pleasure, as a human right. But by all means, please stop talking about food as a love language. And I'll stop there.
So now I have the pleasure of introducing a fellow lover of seeds. Kaylin Cole Hazel is a circulation and access service assistant at the Hatcher Graduate Library. And Kaylin will be presenting Sowing News Stories, Empowering the Future of Seed Sharing with the U of M Seed Library. And Kaylin's favorite food is soup. And I'm curious, Kaylin, as you're coming up, if there's a particular soup.
I just love soup because I always think like, what would I eat on a desert island? Soup, it could be anything. It's a really broad category and it's got liquids, nutrients, the whole shebang. So, hello everyone. I just want to really take a quick moment and express my gratitude to all of you here with me virtually or in this room, and also those who can't be with us, but who we have all collectively been honoring with our attention and our words tonight. Let me go ahead and get things going. So I want to also acknowledge that I am one of infinitely many bodies and care systems who make the Seed Library at U of M across all 3 campuses possible. It would really be quite impossible and, in my opinion, irresponsible for a single person like myself to try to tell you and represent what the Seed Library is or does in a technical way. I also want to tend to the fact that we've heard a lot
today. And I'm guessing that this is the end of the semester for many of the students here. It's crunch time. We've had a lot going on this year. It's a Tuesday after work for a lot of us, or after class. And that our mental stomachs, our minds need time to digest and process what we've heard and throughout the day, and clear room for the full body appreciation of the food and rest that's soon to come. So on the topic of food literacy and food as care, I hope that this can be a place where we can come together in that spirit. Lastly, I want to recognize the producer, audience, or consumer dynamic of a PowerPoint presentation and someone up here talking. It's thinly veiled, but it's very real, and it's a part of the unequal power dynamics of food systems that we've all kind of tacitly been talking at, that we've been feeling a lot about, and that we've been studying for so long. So taking all of this into consideration, along with the fact that in being guided by seeds like this, that producer consumer dynamic doesn't work great for seeds. It only works well for people in limited contexts with a finite timeline. I'm going to flip the script here and offer you all 3 minutes of your time to present the seed library to me and to Seeds. So I'm going to ask you for your participation. I'm a little bit past my time, so we're going to do what we can with this, but every minute or so, I'm going to show you a picture. I would truly appreciate it. Those of you who are in this room, if you feel safe and willing to share what comes to mind in your relationships, in your feelings, in your just free association about your connection or history to seed, as you see these photos, just shout it out and don't wait for other people to stop talking. Everyone talk at once. So I know we're enculturated to think that talking over others is not cool, but envision this as a practice of sharing with the seeds and sharing with each other and speaking up to hear each other's stories, but also create a song together through this. So I'm going to stop talking and let you go for it. All right, thank you. I'm going to wrap up and say thank you so much for participating in what our seeds go through, in these small voices popping up through the ground, in being trapped in an environment like a package, kind of like we're in this room. And this is really what the Seed Library is about, in my mind anyway. So I appreciate your engagement. If you want to check out more, you can go to the link, which is also available on the library website, lib.umich.edu. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lunia Oriel, and this evening I have the pleasure of introducing our final speaker, Clara Gamalski. She is the Assistant Director of Student Life Sustainability. She is also the lead advisor to the University of Michigan Sustainable Food Program, which is where I got to meet and work with her. Her talk today is titled Envisioning Alternative Campus Food Systems for Students by Students. And her favorite food is a slice of a perfectly crisp Detroit-style pizza.
Thank you, Lunia, and thank you all for being here tonight. It's hard to go last. There were so many great speakers here tonight. And before I get started, I just want to say that I feel a bit silly because I'm up here and I'm not a student, and I'm in a room talking to a bunch of students about a student-led food system, right? And there's an irony there. But here I am. And so today, I'm going to give you a story in 3 acts, 3 very short acts about students and food, each of them unfolding at a moment of social and political upheaval. So, Act 1, the recession. I graduated from U of M in 2011, and it was a very bad job market. I was struggling both with saying goodbye to all of my friends, and there was like a disconnect between the radical theory that I had learned in class and my day-to-day life. And it was just hard to sit with. So I worked in food service. And that was the best decision that I ever made because I discovered that I love people. I think you learn more about collaboration across difference, trying to clear a line with 3 people speaking different languages than you do in a group project. And more than that, I started to feel sort of empowered because I started to understand my experience as a food worker through the lens of James and Grace Lee Boggs. I started to think about food and hospitality as really like exercises in community self-reliance. And then I did eventually go to grad school to think a little bit more about that. But back to 2010. UM students are responding to the recession and the climate crisis in their own way. Around 2010, a coalition of organizations working in agriculture, food access, and food recovery formed the UM Sustainable Food Program, or UMSFP, best organization, worst acronym. They formed this organization to organize for campus food systems change, and they were enormously successful. So by 2019, there's a campus farm, there's maize and blue cupboard, and the students in UMSFP at the time are sort of left wondering, what does an organization do when you've met your goals, right? Enter a global pandemic. Act 2. So I started my job at the same time. Campus shut down immediately. And there's just this air of panic and grief and dread everywhere. But somehow this group of really brilliant and creative and food-loving students came up with a framework and a set of programs that I think really changed campus. One example of this is the Farm Stand. Perhaps you've been. It's a collaborative project between UMSFP and the campus farm. It's on the Diag, Thursdays from 12 to 3. There's also a plant sale tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. if you would like to come. But in my opinion, this is secretly one of the most subversive projects at U of M. Students are controlling the supply chain. They're intervening in the built environment, right? There's an element of peer-to-peer grant making with the revenue. But none of this started by UMSFP approaching the university and saying, hello, U of M, may we please use your funds and your property to practice radical community self-reliance? Because that doesn't fly, right? But instead, they started really small. And specifically, they started responding in the current context of campus, which had a bunch of institutional priorities to address, and it so happens that the farm stand could meet their needs. We needed things to do outside, we needed food access, and we needed to address social isolation. So we got permission to run this pilot, and it worked, right? And students shaped every detail of it. Oh, I have to start talking faster. What to grow, how to display it, who staffs it, and where our profits go. And then each year it escalated, right? So workshops, they're adding samples, they're adding games, they're eventually adding grants to give to student organizations to access culturally appropriate food for their events. And then there's a trailer, and students built it themselves, right? So you can see that progression, things growing over time. And from that, I would say that there are 2 lessons in student food sovereignty offered by the farm stand. The first is use our campus as a lab to test and grow student-led programs incrementally by emphasizing hands-on, interdisciplinary, immersive learning. And the second is to let student creativity lead the way. So I swear I'm almost done. As the farm stand was getting off the ground, UMSFP was also planning a series of bite-sized talks, or a variety show where students could explore food justice through different forms of expression. It was supposed to launch in March 2020. It didn't work out, but they did upload some videos on YouTube, and my mom and like 5 other people watched them. But still, the idea stuck, and it came back each year a little bit stronger. Here's some pictures from 2 weeks ago when UMSFP filled the Blue Llama Jazz Club, standing room only, to watch dancing and poetry and stand-up and thesis work, all about food. So 2 more lessons from this. Believe in your work and you can adapt. And students aren't just here to learn, they're also here to teach us, and we can learn some really wonderful things from them. And then 1 more. So we're in Act 3, and I swear Act 3 is like 40 seconds. Students, so we're in a moment right now of overlapping and overwhelming and continuous crisis, right? And in this moment, UMSFP decided to experiment with something new, Rooting for Change Cafe. Each cafe paired a sustainable craft with a themed meal. So an example would be using old t-shirts to weave placemats and then making woven pie crusts and eating them. This event was so busy. 90 people came through in an hour, right? And I think that this was an insane undertaking. But I also think that it made sense right now, because this cafe brings to life all of those 4 principles of student food sovereignty. We're centering student creativity. Campus is a living learning lab. Students are connecting students to each other through food. And then most importantly, they're building a relational network to build power and to conspire together as we like face this current moment, right? So I just want to leave you with 1 question that UMSFP posed on this Rooting for Change menu. What would it look like if U of M had an alternative system in which students produce, prepare, purchase, eat, and make meaning of food together? And I really wonder what that would look like. And I hope that all of you will explore that with me. Thank you.
Thank you to, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you to all of our speakers. I think it was a feast. We can agree I had to. And it's very interesting because I think it's exactly like inviting people that you don't know over for dinner, and you get to hear a little bit about their stories and who they are and what we should care about them. And it's the theme of and about their research. So I think we can all agree that we can really care about every single one of you. So thank you so much for coming today and speaking to us in only 5 minutes, how difficult it is. As you said, it's like a snack. It's easy, it's fast, but it takes a long time to digest. So it's going to take us quite a while to digest everything we've heard today. And we have just a few minutes for 1 or 2 questions. So from the audience, can anyone have maybe an open question that allows any one of our speakers to raise their hand and answer?
And you'll just have to ask the question into the microphone.
Anyone wants to ask a question? We have a shy audience. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. To any of our speakers, what is a way we can take what you've talked today into our life tomorrow?
Great question. Thank you. Who wants to take it? One of our speakers?
Thank you for your question. I think getting involved in the food system, in the context of the presentation that I gave, there are many wild rice camps that are open to the public, and it's a great way to learn more about the community and diverse food systems here in Michigan, and to connect with place and space in a meaningful way.
Thank you. I think it's an open question for other speakers as well. And we can even expand it to why should we care about what you're doing and what you shared with us today.
I have a question that I'd love to hear from any speakers about, and that is, in the present moment where we have so much pressure from a repressive administration, what are your thoughts about the food movement as a form of resistance?
Well, in my opinion, I think like food has been a form of our subsistence for many thousands of years. And we have so much history and rootedness going for us as humans in this world that is, that's not measured in economic like currency. That's like in our hearts. So I would say that about it.
Thank you. So one more minute, I guess. We have just one more minute. So if anyone wants to answer that question, the very important question. Yes.
So I can speak from the physical activity standpoint. Girl Trek was started about 10 years ago, and it's a national, it's probably the largest community-based physical activity program where African-American women use physical activity as a form of resistance because of the oppression that we know in terms of lack of food access, lack of access to safe spaces to exercise, that they took back their health through physical activity. And then if I have time for 30 seconds to read a quote, I always give this quote to my students in terms of like their own personal journey in fighting against systems of oppression. It's by Howard Zinn. Shout out to Howard Zinn. We love Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live in defiance of all that is bad around us is itself a marvelous victory. So I always teach my students to focus on what they can do and how they want to live and how do they want to see the world through physical activity. And we do a lot of harnessing the power of physical activity for social change and show how physical activity and sport has brought people together. And I think we can do the same thing, if not more, in the food world, because food is a way that we can connect, and so is physical activity. So keep fighting.
Thank you. That's exactly I think that's exactly the quote that we needed today, and particularly to wrap up this session. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, uplifting. So very quickly, since we ran out of time, Voting for Change Cafe, I think it's just a few announcements, brings to life elements of a student food, sovereign campus, within community, self-reliance, and demonstrated through radical hospitality and skill sharing. I think we've shared that before. So if you're interested in it, you can go to our website and learn more about it. And next week, it's our last session, April 22nd. So for our students, know that we'll just wrap up the class and talk about all the speakers and panelists that we've learned from this year, and just have a sort of wrap up of the whole semester. Last thing that I want to say for our students as well, that before you leave, if you haven't signed up for extra credit for attendance, please, the sign-up sheet is at the door. Don't forget to do this. And now we're going to have a feast, a real feast, not just a feast of words and thoughts. Since we have two chefs, I don't know if they have a time for one of them to come and talk to us, but here it is. Perfect. Thank you.
How goes it? My name is Angus Bush. I'm one of the chefs. The other guy's Raymond. He's my buddy, my brother. And so what we've created today is kind of like, because we're not native chefs, we're native and we're chefs. I have a background in French, Italian. I studied 15 years at Binkley's restaurant in Arizona, which was a molecular gastronomy test kitchen. We won James Beard nominations, Michelin stars. I've studied under Thomas Keller, Nobu. I've studied at the French Laundry, Little Washington, all over the place. Never gone to culinary school. That says that I have not. But that's what AI thought of me when it found things on the internet. So, you know, a little social consciousness on AI for you too, not just food, but technology. And so what my whole study not only is that is I'm just crazy. I mean, as you can see, I'm wearing a Truffle Shuffle chunk shirt from the Goonies. And that's just how I live my life. And so that expresses itself through our food that we've created and how we examine not only like eating today, but how can we reestablish what was indigenous food? Where did that food come from? How are we using that food today to not only be like, this is indigenous cooking, but also I have a 10-year-old daughter. I got to feed her food. Like, how do I feed her my traditional foods, make it interesting and keep it kind of, you know, more than mac and cheese and chicken nuggets. And so today we have bison meatballs. It's bison that like we got from Myers because I don't have a bison out back. I can't just go do that. And so it's like, it's a mixture of taking bison that's traditional. I harvest wild rice from Minnesota to Wisconsin, up in the northern parts of Michigan in September. Don't have any of that right now, but my buddies do. And so our friends from up in Minnesota gave me some rice that's this beautiful hand harvested, hand parched, this just like golden brown deliciousness right from the lake. And that's mixed into the meatballs along with dried cranberries. So it's taking something that was just from a supermarket. We've introduced things that we've collected, dried, harvested, done things with to make it something better. And then that's also with tomato-based sauce, where tomatoes are fully indigenous. No matter what the Italians want to say, I'm sorry if you're Italian, that we got that from us. And so not just from birds transferring it over continents, and like that's how other vegetables were crossed beneath tribes, nations, all of that. But tomatoes started over in the Americas, not just through birds, but then once all the Northern Europeans came over here, didn't only take tomatoes, they took our corn genetics, they took our pepper genetics, they took everything, tried to grow it over there, doesn't work out so hot. So bring it back over here, mass grow it, send it back over there. And that's how we get tomato sauce. And so that's with the meatballs. I know it's rambling, I'm here, but I'm telling you, I'm just really soaking up time for my buddy Raymond to finish plating things. And so, you know, you got to bear with me to get your food. That's how we work here. And so the next we have, this is my dish that once again, we have this whole Italian theme because we were like, where did most of our genetics go? Well, they went to England. England doesn't have good food. It went to Italy. Italy has better food. So we went there and we were like, how can we take Italian dishes and reintroduce them not only just to indigenous foods, but back to what is Anishinaabe, Gun Lake, you know, Wahweotanon foods. Like these are the foods that have been grown here, harvested and eaten here for thousands of years. Now we're just trying to blend it with something else so we get it back into our stomachs. And so this is a capignata. It's an eggplant dish, know that for sure. And this has like eggplants did originate in Asia, but were brought over to the South Americas around like 1800s, which I thought that was crazy. And bred all the way up through into the North Americas. So that's a mixture of not only eggplants, but cherry tomatoes, which I found are the closest genus to a ancient like small yellow tomato, which was originally grown in South America. And so I'm trying to like give you guys this like trace back lineage of things that are currently here, but can be traced to things that we can once be like, no, that was this, I'm still eating like this, and I'm still like, it's all connecting. And so that I also took like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. Once again, this is like stuff that's indigenous around here. That recipe usually calls for pine nuts. I don't like pine nuts. And there's a whole like ethical thing about like how they're harvested and stuff too. Not my degree of things. I feed you. I don't do lectures. As much as I'm talking right now, I know. And so that has like this mixture of that, also has the wild rice in it. And it gives it like this really nice, like nutty, spicy kind of condensation to it. And so that's also there. And then we made a dessert with goat cheese, some nice fresh blueberries, raspberries, mainly because I really like goat cheese. And so that's all blended together. It's kind of like a deconstructed cheesecake. And so I have like chocolate and honey graham crackers, because I don't know about you, but I like, especially after sitting, I want to play with something. So why not play with your food? And then also too, we made a like mojito, non-alcoholic. I'm allergic to alcohol. And so we made it with mint, pineapple juice, some tonic water, and fresh strawberries. But I think that's about it. And that's all I really got for you. If you have any other questions, you can we're right off the side in that little kitchen. So you can just pop in, talk to us. I'm probably going to tell you to eat something while you're standing there. And that's about it. But thank you guys so much for listening to me and trying my food.
Chef. So thank you, everyone. Please join us for food so we can break bread together. Thank you.